All right. Good evening, folks. This is I Read Old Magazines. Please give me a like and subscribe. This program is going to be reading the Manifesto of Count Goldenherf-Kalergi, called Practical Idealism. It's a fairly long book, so we're going to be reading in chapters. But like the other videos, I'm going to be doing it in segments. Just whenever I get to it. So this is the other manifesto to the Pan-European Union, which you generally don't hear about. If you look on the thumbnail, it has the official Pan-European seal. You usually hear about the Pan-European Manifesto. I don't know exactly how much I want to talk about it in this video. I'd like to just get right into this work, but it is a work that has a lot to do with things that are going on today, including mass immigration, the destruction of the EU, and the replacement of the EU with a system of regionalism, which is being proposed. Partly, the biggest proponents today are people around Dugin, but also in the Catholic world, the center of the trad movement is slowly becoming, with some protest. Archbishop or Cardinal Burke protests against this, but is slowly coming around. The closely propaganda duo Freemasonic linked Dignitatis Humanae Institute, which is also heavily supported by Opus Dei, and is currently trying to stage a coup in the church against Francis. Which, if you don't like Pope Francis, it still doesn't matter. You can't stage a coup against the Pope. It'll just cause even more issues, and you'll get somebody who's not just simply a outgrowth of horrid liberation theology of the Jesuits, but somebody who is a cynical right-wing Freemason like the young Pope. Or so, I'm not saying the young Pope is a Freemason. I'm saying he has that cynical Joseph de Maistre type Weltanschauung, which we'll talk about in this. Kalergi likes that word. But other things interesting in the biography of Kalergi is that this is a Byzantine noble family that comes from Greece, was transplanted by the deposed, which is where Venice lobbied the church to wage a fourth crusade to beat some other heretics, and they actually went in and looted the city and tried to reinstall their ally. So these are people that are extremely dangerous to the political integrity of the church. And they're not past doing terrible things in order to control the church. Besides that, they also operate the Wagner Museum in Venice through their palace. Wagner's mixed in with all sorts of weird people, and the fact that you still have the Wagner fanboys like E. Michael Jones and other people, despite how debased all of his friends were, people like Mikhail Bakunin, etc., and Kalergi, people still think that Wagner's this example of the Übermensch of music. And even Parsifal is not a Catholic virtuous opera. It's a very Gnostic opera, the same kind of Gnosticism that Charles Coulomb practices, and which we'll be talking about soon. So I want to get on with this. Like I said, the successor organization to the Pan-European Union today, it went through Kalergi with the support of Freemasons in Nazi Germany. This is a documented fact. John Levi in Intermarium has a book on this issue, discusses this in length. The Nazis actually threw Kalergi out because of his Freemasonry. Not because he was a Jew, but because of his Freemasonry. The Nazis had at least learned, like many people, that Freemasonry had been behind all of the insurrectionary movements since the Jacobins in England, or in Europe. Whoops, controlled by England. There we go. Because the Duke of Kent controls all these Grand Orient institutions, and lo and behold, who is or was the intermediary president of Dignitatis Humanae Institute was the son of the Duke of Kent. But anyway, going on with the clergy issue, he's thrown out, and then he talked about his membership in Freemasonry, and then Count Christian Dianlau, who's on the left of the thumbnail there, Chevalier in the Knights of St. Lazarus of Jerusalem, which is a sister brother organization of the Knights of Malta, and he hangs out with the Knights of Malta, and he's related to the Schlumberger family, which we talked about with their industrial dealings with Haldmar Schacht, and the Dawes family, the Buckley family. I need to stop the run-on sentences. I get myself all worked up here. Count Christian Dianlau claims that Kalergi was financed by Freemasons, and he was also financed by Max Warburg and some of the usual suspects involved in Hitler's rise to power. So why is this Catholic lauded for his anti-communism, who worked hand in hand with the Buckley Dulles CIA to fight communism and organize American tradcats against communism? Why is this guy taking on the torch of this Freemasonic anti-ethnic? They wanted to destroy all the European ethnicities, generally anti-Catholic, anti-Christendom. Why is he working with this movement? And why is Christian Dianlau today working with this movement ahead of the Knights of St. Lazarus of Jerusalem, sister organization of Knights of Malta? Well, I don't. The prominent Catholic tradcat news and theology channels on YouTube and other places. There's now this cult of Blessed Karl Habsburg, which is fine. I believe Blessed Karl Habsburg died a saint, but his son Otto is not. And I think that this cult of Blessed Karl, because it's promoted so much, and the personality, the Twitter personality, social media personality of Edward Habsburg, as popular as he's becoming, is showing that there's a rising cult of personality around the Habsburgs who are tied in with, I think, pan-European Eurasianism, a kind of merger of that and the Dugin system, as well as they're obviously the initial funders and all of that of Dignitatis Humanae Institute, which is now run by Steve Bannon, an Evolian fascist. I've had other videos on this subject, so I'm not going to go on, and we're going to start reading Practical Idealism. And this is I'll post a link here. This is the manifesto that you don't hear about. You can see pictures of Otto von Habsburg reading and completely endorsing the Pan-European Manifesto written by Kalergi, but you do not see this particular manifesto. And this has a lot of ridiculously disgusting things in it. So we're going to go on. And like I said, this is a pan-European publication. It is part of the ideology of pan-Europeanism. And I do not wholly support this idea that the EU came out of pan-Europa. I think this is a compromise compared to what pan-Europeanism is, because pan-Europeanism is a system of regions without ethnicity. And I think that's what might be coming down the line after all of the crossbreeding of immigrants and all of the violence that's being staged between both sides ends, and the domination of the new Russian Imperium. If these things do happen, we'll see a very different Europe on the basis of regionalism. And this has been something that has been in design. It's not one plan that's being followed, but it's multiple plans. It's the same general idea, and um, it serves both left and right elites. It's not just the globalists. It's not just the traditionalists. It's not. It is a kind of a dialectic becoming, and I don't. That's not particularly a conspiratorial aspect of it. That is a necessary aspect. It is an aspect of something in reality coming into being. Um, is a political reality. It's just nobody is talking about it because it's so slow to witness, or for you to witness, or for you to follow, unless if you understand where all the moving parts are coming from and where their orientation is. But going on. Introduction. Practical idealism is heroism. This is by Kalergi. Practical materialism, eudaimonismus. Those who do not believe in the ideal that has no reason to be ideal to act or for ideal to fight and suffer. Because he knows and recognizes only a single value, the desire, only a single evil, the pain. Heroism, faith, and commitment to the ideal of advanced conviction that there are higher values than the desire and greater evils as pain. This contrast permeates the whole of human history. It is the contrast of Epicurus, Aeon, and Stoikern. The contrast is much deeper than intermediate Thyssen and atheists Epicure, because there were to believe as gods Epicure itself, and there were idealists, the atheists were as Buddha. It is therefore not the faith in gods, but for faith in values, spoken like a true traditionalist. Keep in mind, his main influences were the German conservative revolution, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and Kant. Now, I'm sure people don't usually recognize this, but because he's a traditionalist, Joseph de Maistre. So you get the three big individuals behind the U-turn after the Enlightenment, which wants to go back to neo-medievalism. And this is, I believe, what a lot of the Catholic aristocracy, supposed Catholic aristocracy, actually believes, that it is not faith in gods, but faith in values that they're protecting. The materialism is a prerequisite solver, but imagination loose and unshaded victims. The European idealism is always problematic and often entangled in nonsense and madness, still owes him humanity, your greatest works and deeds. And since this is a translation, the words "the" will often be either him or her, because certain nouns have genders, so you'll figure it out. Heroism is the aristocracy of the mind. Heroism is with the aristocratic ideal as related, such as materialism with the democratic. Tables. Democracy also believes more in the number than the value, more luck than to size. That's a issue of René Guénon, the quantitative versus the qualitative. This is why political democracy will only be fruitful and creative if you use the aristocracy of the name and the gold, broken in order to replace a new aristocracy of the spirit and the spirit to bear new forever. The final purpose of democracy is therefore intellectual aristocracy. She wants to create the materialist enjoyment, the idealists. The guide should be at the center of the rule. The noble sense at this point of the noble name, the rich heart, and the place of the rich pocket. This is the sense of the development that is democratically called. Any other sense would be cultural suicide. Now, here is a misconception of Plato. The guide should be. What the hell? Did this thing just move without me moving it? It is therefore no coincidence that Plato, also the prophet of intellectual aristocracy and the socialist economy, now, and at the same time the father of idealistic Weltanschauung. For both, the aristocracy and socialism are practical idealism. So there you go. The ascetic idealism of the South is revealed as religion, the heroic idealism of the North as a technique. This is because the nature of the North was a challenge to man. Other people's kingdoms, the Europeans, took the challenge and fought. He fought until he was strong enough to subdue the earth. He fought to the nature itself, as challenged him in the service of obligation. This fight is called heroism and begat heroism. It was the hero for Europe, what the history of Asia and the hero worship supplanted in the veneration of the saints. The active ideal replaces the contemplative, and it was a great for an ideal to fight than to suffer. The purpose of the heroic mission, world mission, Europe has only been fully grasped to the modern age. Now, I believe the idea of suffering as the basis for life is Kierkegaard and his bullshit that later on became liberation theology, the being in the world concept. Or Kierkegaard, Heidegger, I believe. Heidegger, the official philosopher of the Nazi Party. So this is like just based on the worst mix of counter-enlightenment philosophers and German conservative revolution philosophers that for some reason today are made the epitome of traditionalism, despite the fact that they reject the real history of Europe. The purpose of the heroic world mission, Europe has only been fully grasped the modern age, because only with the modern era begins his technical age, his liberation war against the winter. This technical age is also the age of work. The worker is the hero of our time. His contrast is not the citizens, but the parasites. The aim of the worker is the creation, the parasite, a rot, ragged, and joy. Just like everybody in third positionism, the proletariat, the peasant, they're all the people that are on the altar to be worshipped. Just like G.K. Chesterton praises the Bolsheviks in his foreword to Arthur Penty's anti-industrial, anti-technology book against machines. G.K. Chesterton says that the capitalists don't understand the peasant cult in the Bolshevik revolution, and that this is why they're seriously incapable of understanding distributism. Completely, what can I say, discredited individual, at least in terms of his political works, G.K. Chesterton. But somehow people still fall for this thing. This is why the technology, modern heroism, and Arba either practical idealist. The political and social problem of the 20th century is technological progress of the 19th obtained. This promotion of time is hampered by the fact that the development of technology without a break in the faster pace than the development takes place of the human person and of all humanity. The risk can be avoided either by the mankind technological progress slows down or by using social progress accelerated. Otherwise, you will lose your balance and rolls over. The World War was a warning. It provides technology man before the alternative, suicide or understanding. This is why the development of the world in coming decades without example, the present imbalance of technical and social organization is entwined to devastating disasters, or to political progress, to rapid and thoroughness of all historical models behind and a new leaf in the history of humanity is opened. So what we're establishing here with Kalergi is a plan for a joint rule by aristocracy and technocrats. So mind you, when the idiot monarchist, traditionalist political theorists come out, they don't talk about this. They don't talk that there's this plan to have a joint merger of these two systems to direct humanity. As the technology of the human impact force and the heroism of his new ways begins the war in the consciousness of mankind, its historic role to play. His legacy is the work. Humanity is one day to jointly organize the earth, everything absurd what you today you have withheld. So there's some German words in here. As soon as this view is durchkränkt, every war is a civil war and every murder a murder. The age of the war will then also seem barbaric, seem likely today the age of man gluttony. This development will come if we believe in it and you fight. If we are not so short-sighted, the major lines of development from the eyes to lose, still so far-sighted. The practical ways and obstacles to overlook the between us. Our objectives are clear. If we are indulgent in the clear knowledge of upcoming fights and difficulties connecting to the heroic desire to overcome, only this optimism of will is the pessimism of the knowledge, complement and defeat, as Schopenhauer. Instead of the shackles of the anachronistic presence to preserve and stand, of better ways to dream, so we want to take an active part in the development of the world through practical idealism. Vienna, November 1925. That's the introduction. Nobility, 1920. The memory of my father, Heinrich Graf Goldenherf-Kalergi, and devotion and gratitude. First part, from rustic and urban people. Man, city, country, country, and city are two poles of human existence. Country and city witness their special people's types, the rustic and urban people. Rustic man and urban man are psychologically antipodes. Farmers of different areas of the same one another morally more often than the townspeople of neighboring city. Between the land and the land, between the town and the city is the area, between the city and the country of the time. Under the European rustic life represented as all age from the Stone Age to the Middle Ages, while only the world cities of the West, the extremsten urban type, have produced representatives of modern civilization. To disconnect centuries, often millennia, a large city from the countryside that surrounds it. The urban man thinks differently, writes differently, feels differently, is different than the rustic man. The life of the big city is abstract, mechanically rational, the country life specifically organic, irrational. The city is of rationalistic, skeptical, unbelieving, the countryman emotional, um, believing, and superstitious. Every thought and feeling of the countryman has emerged around the nature that he lives in symbiosis with the animal, the living creature of God. It is used acts with its landscape, depending on the weather and the time of year. The focal point of the urban soul is the society. She lives in symbiosis with the machine, the dead creature of the people. It is the city of man as far as possible, independent of time and space, and the time of the year, the climate. The country one believes in the violence of the nature on the man. The city of man believes in the power of man over nature. Man is the rustic natural product, the urban man social product. One sees purpose, dimension in top of the world in the cosmos, the other in humanity. The rustic man is conservative as nature, the urban man progressive as society. All the progress at all is from cities and city dwellers. The city of man himself is mostly the product of revolution within a rural race. With its rustic tradition broken, the big city went, and there is a life on the new basic begins. The new basis begins. The big city steals its residents enjoy the nature of beauty. As compensation offers you art. Theater, concerts, galleries are substitutes for eternal and changing beauties of the landscape. After a full Tagwerk, ugliness offers those institutes of an art the city dwellers beauty in concentrated form. In the country, you are easily dispensable. Nature is the extensive art intensive form of beauty. The ratio of the urban people to nature, the hymn is missing, is dominated by the longing, while the nature, the rustic people, constant performance. Therefore, she perceives the city dwellers mainly romantic, the country classic man. The social, Christian morality is an urban phenomenon because it is the function of human coexistence of society. The typical city dweller, religioso, connects Christian morality with skepticism, rationalism with materialism, and mechanistic atheism. The belief it derives from the fact is that socialism, the modern large city religion. So, like some of these pagan people today connecting Christian Orthodox are doing, Western Christianity with the Enlightenment and all of the things that come out of the Enlightenment, socialism, etc., materialism. Complete bullshit. But Kalergi agrees with the Orthodox, Neo-Orthodox view on these issues. He would more likely be idolizing the old believers like Alexander Dugin, or like Joseph the Maistre did. For the rustic barbarians of European Christianity is little more than a reprint of paganism modified with mythology and new belief. A true religion is faith in the nature of the force to the fate. The city and country people do not know each other, therefore mistrust and misunderstand each other and live in rapt or open hostility. There are many words under which this elementary opposition hides: red and green international, industrialism and agrariatum, progress and reaction, Judaism and anti-Semitism. All cities draw their forces from the land. All country draws its culture from the city. The country is the soil from which the city is to be renewed, is the source that you feed, the root from which you flourish. Cities grow and die. The country is forever. We have to understand major issue concerning the regionalization of Europe is they want industrial islands, basically extremely small areas where you're capable of having heavy industry in cities, and then the rest of it is going to be green space and these places where you might have monks, these places, living, or little solidarist communities, integralist communities, little agricultural communities, and then the people from the city can come out on like these giant infrastructure projects that span across the countryside for tourist purposes. And you basically can curate all these different religions that live in monastic kind of life out in the country. And then you also have things like temporary autonomous zones where you have your libertarians and anarchists, anarcho-syndicalists all living. Junker. This is the second part of this chapter. Writing flowering of rustic people is the land of aristocrats of the Junker. Flower of the urban people is the intellectuals, the writers. Country and city both have their specific type of noble birth. While the nobility is against the spirit of nobility, blood aristocracy against brain nobility. The typical Junker combines the maximum character with a minimum of intellect. The typical writer, a maximum of intellect with a minimum of character. Not always and everywhere you lack the country nobility of spirit, the city of nobility of character. As in England of the modern era was in Germany, the minstrel time of blood nobility as excellent cultural element. On the other hand, during the Catholic spirit nobility of the Jesuits and the Chinese spirit nobility of the Mandarins, in its heyday as much nature as spirit proved. The Junker and Literati summits with the principles against the rustic and urban people. Typical profession of the Junker caste is the officer profession. Typical profession of the light literate, the caste of the profession. The Junker officer remained mentally and spiritually at the level of a knight, hard on himself and others, mandatory, loyal, energetic, steadfast, conservative, and limited. He lives in a world dynastischer, militaristic, tischer, national and social prejudices, with a deep mistrust of all modern against the big city, democracy, socialism, internationalism. He connects an equally profound faith in his blood, his honor, and the belief of his father. So this is, I think, Prussianism. One thing that might have led to the Nazis' rise, but the Prussians were also the center of all of the coups against Adolf Hitler, in which interests close to Alan Dulles and the Buckley family actually informed Heinrich Himmler of assassination attempts of certain Nazi officials at different times. Probably one of the reasons why Tom Cruise, Nazi Tom Cruise, was discovered. What's his name? The guy with the eye patch in the movie Valkyrie. Going on. He despised the city dwellers, especially the Jewish writers and journalists. The writer rushed ahead of time. Without prejudice, he represents modern ideas in politics, art, business. It is progressive, skeptical, witty, versatile, adaptable. It is eudaemonist, rationalist, socialist, materialist. It has overestimated the spirit, underestimated body and character, and despised the Junker as lagging barbarians. Nature of the Junker is rigidity of the will. Nature of the literates is a movement of the spirit. Junker and writer are born rivals and opponents. Where the Junker caste, there is the spirit of violence. In the soft, reactionary times is the political influence of the intellectual turned off, or at least to a limited extent. Let me just check the the show here. Nobody's watching the show. Give me a like. There's 2 people in the chat. I should have 3 likes. This is hard to listen to. I'm sure it is. But I mean, it's like reading Mein Kampf. It's complete insanity, even when it's properly translated. So don't worry that doesn't all make sense, because it wouldn't make sense anyway. Juncker and Ryder. There is the literary cast, the violence of the spirit soft. The democracy triumphs over feudalism, socialism on militarism. The hate of the will of the aristocracy and the spirit of the aristocracy of Germany against each other is rooted in misunderstanding. Each sees only the shadow side of the other, and it's blind to the benefits. The psyche of the Junkers, rustic people, remains a high-standing light, literates forever closed. While almost all Junker, the soul of the intellectuals of the ban-mentioned foreign remains. Modern literature down, while the last angle journalist for superior officers only superiority contempt feels. Damn, dude. Through this double misunderstanding, alien mentality has only the militaristic Germany, the resistant fort of the urban masses against the war, then underestimated the revolutionary Germany, the resistance force of the rustic masses against the revolution. The leaders of country misalignment of the psyche of the city and its tendency to pacifism. The leader of the city's misalignment of the psyche of the country people and their tendency to reaction. So Germany has not lost the war, then the revolution. The contrary nature of the Junkers and the literates is due to the fact that these 2 types of extreme, not summit points of blood and spirit nobility, because the highest form of blood nobility is the grand seigneur of the spirit of nobility of genius. These 2 aristocrats are not only compatible, they are related. Caesar, the completion of the grand seigneur, was the most brilliant of Romans. Goethe, the summit of ingenuity, was of all German poets most grand seigneur. Here, as everywhere, the medium levels on the strongest during the summit touch. The consummate aristocrat is the same time aristocrat of the will and of the spirit, but neither Junker nor Wright with vigor, spirit, and character. Lack of such spirit be contemplated rather than fight. In Egypt, India, the Chaldees once ruled by priests and intellectuals and warrior together. The priests leaned against the force of the will to the kings before the power of the spirit. Brains the objectives, arms blaze the path. And this is exactly what Steve Bannon's Dignitatis Humanae Institute's Judeo-Christian West Gladiator School is attempting to do, is to create warrior monks just like Uriah in Vichy, France. The priests and the kings working together as a class to establish an aristocracy, a technocracy, generation of leadership to bring these things into being. Okay, section 3. Gentlemen, Bohemian noble blood and spirit of Europe created their specific types. England, blood nobility. The gentleman's Bohemian noble spirit of France. Gentlemen and Bohemian meet in order to ensure that the soil ugliness spear to escape civil life. The gentleman overcomes them by Bohemian style. The Iron by temperament. The gentleman, the informality of life form. The Bohemian, the sustainability of life. Colorless. The gentleman in the disorder human relations ordered, the Bohemian in their oppression freedom. The beauty of the gentleman ideal is based on the form, style, harmony. It is the static, classic, Apollonish. The beauty of the Bohemian ideal based on temperament, freedom, vitality. It is dynamic, romantic, Dionysible. So Dionysian. The gentleman idealized and stylized its wealth. The Bohemian idolized and stylized his poverty. The gentleman is on tradition that the Bohemian to protest. The essence of gentleman is conservative, the essence of Bohemian revolutionary. Mutter of the gentleman is ideal England, the most conservative country in Europe. Always praise for England. England is a center of traditionalism, and that's why Lord Windsor had to come down to the Dignitatis Humanae Institute as the interim president. The cradle of Bohemia is France, the most revolutionary country in Europe. The gentleman is the ideal form of life of the caste, the Bohemian ideal form of life personalities. The gentleman ideal points beyond England back to Roman STOA. The Bohemian ideal points back beyond France back to the ancient Greek agora. The Roman statesmen approached the gentleman type, the Greek philosopher the Bohemian type. Caesar and Seneca were gentlemen, Socrates and Diogenes Bohemians. The focus of the gentleman is located in physically mental, of the Bohemian in the intellectual. The gentleman may fool, the Bohemian must be criminals. Both are ideal human crystallization phenomena, as the crystal is only in austerer environment can form thanks to those two ideals for their existence in the English and French freedom. In Imperial Germany lacked the atmosphere to crystallize personalization. Therefore, it could not develop as worthy as the ideal. The gentleman was missing, the German of the Bohemian style, for the temperament to both grace and suppleness. Since he is in reality no adequate form of the life found him, sought the German in its seal for ideal embodiment, German system, and found then physical and psychological ideal, the young Siegfried, as the spiritual ideal, the old fist. Both were ideal, romantic, anachronistic, and the distortion of reality froze the romantic Siegfried ideal for Prussian officer, the lieutenant, the romantic Faust ideal for German scholars, to professor. In the place of the organic ideal were mechanical. The officer represents the mechanization of the mental, frozen Siegfried, the professor, the mechanization of the intellectual, frozen fist. Germany, proud as to its officers and professors. You saw it in the flower of the nation, such as the UK and its political leaders, the Romanesque peoples and their arts. The German people want higher development. It must revise its ideal. His drive must have the military one-sidedness blasting the wide to politically human versatility. His spirit must be purely scientific, close blast, and wide for the synthesis of the poet-thinker. The 19th century has two men for the German people, given to the largest style these demands higher Germans embodied. Bismarck, the hero of fact, Goethe, the heroes of the spirit. Now, completely ignoring Friedrich Schiller as a great poet of freedom. I mean, this is a complete bullshit story about Germany, but we're going on. Kalergi was trying to. I mean, he did get people like Nazi General Karl Haushofer behind him, Rudolf Hess at some point behind him. He was trying to defeat the Nazi Party politically and be the German Revolutionary Party that took over. However, he didn't have enough backing, and the populace was behind Hitler. So it didn't work out. Bismarck replaced, deepened, and animates the tacky became the Siegfried ideal. Goethe replaced, deepened, and animates the dusty Fausti ideal. Bismarck had the qualities of the German officer without its error. Goethe had the qualities of German scholars without the error. And Bismarck overcomes the superiority of the statesman, limited the officer. And Goethe overcomes the superiority of the poet-thinker, limited of the scholar. In both, the organic personality ideal the mechanical, the man the puppet. Through his exemplary personality, Bismarck, more for the development of the Germans, is done by his empire founding, by his Olympic existence, has Goethe the German people rich gifts as by his Faust. For Faust is how Goethe's Werther, Master, and Tasso only a fragment of Goethe's human emotions. Germany should be careful not to his living examples to pull down and Volkskitchen from Bismarck, a sergeant, from Goethe to make a school champion. The consequence of these two summit German human growth could Germany grow and healthy. Of them can be active and contemplative size learning, energy and wisdom. For Bismarck and Goethe are two focal points to a new German lifestyle. The Western ideal would be equal. Inbreeding, section 4. Crossing usually is the rustic man inbred product, the urban man hybrid. Parents and first parents of farmers generally originate from the same thinly populated area, the noblemen from the same thin top layer. In both cases are the ancestors themselves related by blood and therefore often physically, psychologically, mentally similar. As a result, you inherit their common traits with tendencies, passions, prejudices, inhibitions in increased levels on their children and descendants. The nature of the inbred are fidelity, piety, a sense of family, box spirit, resistance, pig-headedness, energy, limited makes the prejudices that lack of objectivity close of the horizon. Here, it's a variation of the previous generation, but simply the repetition at the point of development conservation. In the big city meets international races, levels. In the rural is the urban man hybrid from a variety of social and national elements in him raised the opposite character. Estate, prejudices, inhibitions, will, borders, zen, and worldviews of his parents and first parents on at least one another of weaknesses. The result is that many hybrid characters indifference, abandon will, weakness, instability, irreverent nature, and faithlessness with objectivity, versatility, mental alertness, freedom from prejudice, and the width of horizon. Hybrids are different from their parents and are always first parents. Each generation is a variation of the previous, either within the meaning of evolution or degeneration. Man is one of the inbred element, the hybrid more soul man. So I guess instead of small soul bug man, I guess I don't know. He has a larger soul, the hybrid man. I don't know. In every individual life continues his ancestors as elements of his soul. Same each other, it is the uniform, monotonous, strive apart, so is the man varied, complicated, and differentiated. The size of the spirit lies in its texity, which is the ability to capture and everything to include. The size of character is in its intensity, that is, in its ability to highly concentrated and resistant to want. So, in a sense, wisdom and dynamism of contradictions. Depending pronounce the ability and inclination of a people, the things as wise from all sides to see and is without prejudice to any position. The weaker is usually his will, pulse after a certain direction is safe to act. For each image are against motives, each faith skepticism. Everyone did the insight in their cosmic speech, lack of prevention. Effectively, only the limited, the unilateral man. But there is not just an unconscious, naive. There is also a Buust Heroic Limited. The Heroic Limited and this type includes all truly great Tat mention voluntarily, sometimes switches off all the pages of his being, except the one that is his action. I guess this is Das Sign of Heidegger. Lens critical, skeptical, consider it before or after his acts. During the fact, it is subjective faith, one sided, unfair. Wisdom inhibits energy, energy denied the wisdom. The strongest will is ineffective if it is devoid of direction. Also, a weak will solve most effective when it is one sided. There is no life without actually wrong, mistake, debt. Those who are afraid of the odium to wear, the place to stay, in the rich of the idea, the tranquility, the passivity. Real people are always silent because each claim is, in a sense, lie, heart. Pure people are always inactive because each fact is, in a sense, wrong. It is a brave, but to speak at the risk to lie, to act on the risk of doing injustice. Inbreeding weakens the character, strengthens the spirit. Crossing weakens the character, strengthens the spirit. We are inbreeding and crossing under the auspices happy together to witness the highest human type of the strongest character with the sharpest spirit connects. We are in unfortunate auspices inbreeding and mixture meet create degenerate types with weak character, obtuse spirit. The man of distant future hybrid, the current breeds and boxes are in growing, the overcoming of space, time, and prejudice to victims. The Euro-Negroid future race. So this is where he gets into um, what people are calling the anti-white agenda, uh, of which the mass migration is part of a larger plan. Um, So he says the European Negroid future race, externally the ancient Egyptian similar, the diversity of the peoples through a variety of personalities replaced. Because according to the laws of inheritance is growing with the ancestors, the diversity with the uniformity of the ancestors of the uniformity of the offspring. In inbred families is a child of the other, for all represent the common family type. In hybrid families, defer the children more closely to each other. Each form a new variation of divergence of parental and vor- vorel- vorelterlichen vorelterlichen elements. Inbreeding creates characteristic types. Crossing creates unique personalities. The precursor of the planetary people of the future is the modern Europe, the Russia, as a Slavic Tartar Finnish hybrid. Pan-European Union with the Eurasian Union. Because he, among all the peoples of Europe, least of race, he is the typical more soul people with the wide, rich, inclusive soul. Its strongest antipode is the island Brit, state of the bred, one Ellen man who strength is in character, in the will, in a one-sided typical. Modern Europe owes him the most closed, most complete type, the gentleman. So this is a Russian, Slavic, Tartar, Finnish hybrid, bred with the gentleman who he has before said is centered in England. Isn't it interesting that Brexit will provide the shift of the UK away from NATO into the orbit of Russian geopolitics, which not currently is interested in the Eurasian Union, but eventually will drift there simply as a matter of necessity. No, I really do hate this translation. It's terrible. If I get my hands on a better translation, we can redo this chapter. Thank you, Raphael. See, he gave me a like in the chat, a thumbs up, and a real like in real life. It's great. Thanks for watching. Are you the Chaos Cat blog, Raphael? Because there's a guy named Chaos Cat who has me on his blog. He has a Bannon section that's devoted specifically to Steve Bannon. It's very interesting. Going on, section 5, Pagan and Christian mentality, two forms of soul struggle for world domination, paganism and Christianity. With the denominations, the name have the soul forms only very external relations. The focus will be from the dogmatic to the ethical, mythological, and psychological laid. So changing Buddhism in ultra-Christianity, while Americanism as modernized paganism appears. The Orient is a main carrier of Christian. The Occident main carrier pagan mentality. Pagan Chinese Christians are better than Christian Germans. So here's the lauding by the pan-Europeans of the Eastern Christians. Paganism is energy. Christianity loved to the top of the ethical value of scale. The Christian ideal is loving wholly, a pagan ideal of winning hero. The homo ferus Christianity once in a homo clomesticus walk. The prey animal man in the house animal man, while paganism, humans, the supermen, Chigov monkey once. Who fucking translated this? Christianity wants tiger to tame cats. Paganism, cats to tigers increase. So that makes sense. Main heralds of modern Christianity was Tolstoy. So that's true. Creating the modern Tolstoyan concept of simply reducing Christianity to charitable acts. Main heralds of modern paganism, Nietzsche. The Germanic Edda religion was pure paganism. She lived in Christian mask, in the Middle Ages as a chivalrous, in the modern era as an imperialist and materialistic ideology. Officers, Junkers, colonists, industry masters are the leading representatives of modern paganism. Energy, bravery, size, freedom, power, glory, and honor are the ideals of paganism, while love, mild humility, compassion, and self-denial, Christian ideal. The antithesis, pagan Christianity is neither with the antithesis, rustic man, urban man, nor with inbreeding crossing. But there is no doubt that it favors rustic barbarianism and inbreeding the development of pagan urban civilization and mixed the development of Christian mentality. Generally, valid pagan individualism is only possible in thinly populated Earth-Strichen, where the individual claim and ruthlessly unfold, without equal in contrast to his fellow human beings to devices. In areas where the man Übervolkerten on man must be the socialist principle of mutual support, the individualist principle of life struggle to complement and part amnesia. Christianity and socialism are large international city products. Christianity took as the world religion its output from the race-free world city of Rome. The socialism of the national joint industrialist city, the rural population from Pagani. As it is today, the country people is that the implementation of the socialist life form the strongest resistance. Always were sparsely populated northern areas, centers pagan volition, densely populated southern areas of the breeding sites of Christian feeling. So it's interesting, all the pagans today in the alt-right, Red Ice Radio, that welcomes in a lot of the weirdo trads like Jay Dyer. Um, people they always look at Kalergi as